Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm reviewing Tamron's 150 to 500 millimeter lens, and I'm pairing it with Sony's a6600 camera body. So you have to remember that that's an APS-C size sensor camera, and so of course that gives you an advantage when you're using a telephoto lens like that for wildlife. Instead of being a 150 to 5, it's equivalent to 225 and then to 750. So you've got 750 millimeters when you zoom that thing all the way out, and that's excellent for wildlife. And I'm going to go over 3 different types of subjects today and see how this lens performs on stationary or static subjects. And then I'm going to do some video on wildlife and see how the camera performs with video. And then the hardest test of all is going to be birds in flight or fast action photography on wildlife. So let's get into this review and let's see how this lens performs with this a6600 camera body. So this lens has several buttons, and I went over those in my setup guide, and I'll put a link to that video here. And we'll go over some of the specifications of this lens. It is a variable aperture zoom lens. What that means is when you start out at 150 on the zoom range, it's an f5.0 lens, and as you zoom in, it changes, the aperture changes, and at 250, it's an f5.6 lens at the maximum aperture, and at 400, it changes over to f6.3, and as you zoom all the way to 500, it becomes an f6.7 maximum aperture lens. So just keep that in mind. As you zoom in, you're actually losing a little bit of light from f5 at the wider angle focal length and f6.7 at the long focal length. A couple of other specifications about the lens. It weighs 3.8 pounds or 1.7 kilograms. It's not a lightweight lens, but I have several lenses for wildlife which are a lot heavier than this one. So to me, it actually feels like a fairly lightweight lens, and it balances nice in the hand, and it's got a tripod collar built into it that already has an Arca Swiss plate, and I like that feature. The lens is about 8.5 inches long at the 150 millimeter range. And then when you zoom it in to 500, it becomes about an 11.5 inch long lens. For static subjects or slow moving subjects, I'm using Tracking Flexible Spot M. And the reason why I choose that one is because once I lock onto the subject's eye, if it's a duck on the water or a squirrel in a tree or something like that, if the squirrel then moves its head, the square focused point will stay on that squirrel as he changes position, and I find that that's a very accurate system for stationary or slow moving subjects. For video, I'm just using the wide focus area, and it seems to work fairly well to figure out what I want to focus on as the deer or whatever is moving through the frame. Wide seems to work perfect. For fast-moving subjects, like birds in flight, against a non-distracting background like the sky or against some clean water or things like that, then I'm just using the zone or the wide focus points. And it seems like those focus points are able to capture that bird's head as it flies by and give me the sharp shots. Let's get into several of my examples now for static or stationary subjects. Most of the time when I photograph birds, I want them to be moving or doing something, but I was testing the lens out, and so I was happy to photograph these geese and these seagulls when they weren't moving. Then I had a whole bunch of smaller birds that happened to be perched up in a tree. Those are good examples where the subject wasn't moving very fast. I also had a lot of deer at a wildlife refuge nearby my house. You can see zoomed in on this shot how sharp and crisp that focus can be on this lens. Now here's a deer that was just so close to my car. I was using my car as a blind that it kind of looks like a mount on a wall, so it's not a great picture, but I just want to use it to show how sharp the lens can be. Here's another couple examples of deer against beautiful fall color. And then I had a lot of waterfowl on the lake, and they weren't flying around, they were swimming around, and so I've got lots of examples of how good this lens can focus. Now, there was one tree that was reflected in this pond, giving a red color, and then I got a whole bunch of Canadian geese swimming into that reflection, and so my water just looks this deep dark red, which looks almost fake, but it's just the reflection of that tree in the water. Squirrels are all over the place near my house and in the parks that I go to, so I've got lots of pictures of squirrels here. I also came across several big elk in Colorado while I was carrying the lens, and I happened to be hand holding, and this was a huge challenge for this lens because I saw these elk, specifically this male elk, after the sun had already gone behind the mountains, and so it was getting dark, and you can see with a shutter speed of a 50th of a second, lens was able to focus good even though the light was low, and I was able to get a decently sharp shot of this male elk in several positions. Now let's look at a few examples of the videos that I've been getting with the Tamron 150-500 on my Sony a6600. You're going to see several of the same characters that you saw in my slow or static subject chapter, and that is white-tailed deer at the wildlife refuge near my house. Here's a couple of videos of squirrels. And here's some moving pelicans and a blast off with a bunch of seagulls. And I tried a couple of slow motion videos of these seagulls flying by against a blue sky so we could just see how that lens performs when we really slow down the motion of a flying bird. I also have several videos of this male elk with his harem of cows here in Colorado. And he ran around chasing off all the other males. Of course, he was bugling like crazy. The lens performed pretty well following that elk as he even went behind a tree here or went behind a few other elk that weren't my main subject. The lens was able to maintain and hold that focus on that elk pretty decently, and that's why I give it a good grade for video. Okay, my examples of fast action include waterfowl, which was seagulls, pelicans, and ducks. And then I spent a morning photographing these gulls against the blue sky. So you can see that the detail is there. When the wing doesn't get in the way, the lens does get the eye in focus as you want it to. Other fast action that I had was a chipmunk. They move very quickly and it's hard to get those animals to slow down. Once in a while they'll stop for you, but you need that camera to be able to react quickly, and you need that lens to focus fast on that eye of the chipmunk because he's constantly running back and forth. And then I had several examples of white pelicans here in Colorado, and the lens does pretty good on getting the eye in focus, although a lot of times it seems like it wants to grab onto the wing and focus on that, and so you get a few missed shots even though a pelican's a very slow-moving bird. For slow-moving or static subjects, the lens is an A+. It's a joy to use. It captures the focus crisp and sharp, as you've seen from the examples, and it's definitely an A+ on those slow-moving subjects. For video, I'm going to give it an A-. I found a few situations where the video didn't quite capture the focus that I wanted. And for birds in flight and fast-moving animals, I'm going to give the lens a B. It's not perfect for birds in flight. It doesn't quite keep up with some of those faster birds, and the focus sometimes seems to grab somewhere else rather than the bird's head where I want it to be. And so again, for fast action and birds in flight, the lens gets an overall grade of a B. As always, I appreciate you watching my videos, and we'll see you soon.